6 years after my failed attempt to capture the sinister villain. The system contacted me again. The child you left for the villain back then. He found your portrait and is clamoring to see you. 6 years ago, Wei Zhizhao discovered I was a captor, and his attraction to me plummeted from 99% to 100%. Later, he entered the Eastern Palace, and I gave birth, dragging my frail body from the capital. I was lost in thought when a barrage of comments suddenly appeared before my eyes. She's my biological mother? So ordinary, a far cry from the bright and cheerful little sun heroine. My dear, you're so confused. Such a scheming woman isn't worthy of being your mother. Don't worry, once my dear learns the truth about the supporting actress abandoning him, he'll completely despise her. At the same moment, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door. In the gloom of night, a delicate little boy stood outside the door about 5 or 6 years old, dressed in a brocade suit. It was obvious he wasn't from an ordinary family. When our eyes met, I was startled. Then the door slammed shut. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding. How could they be so similar? This child's features were a spitting image of Wei Zhizhao. After being turned away, the child outside began pounding on the door. I see you. Open the door. He called for a long time, but when I didn't respond, the child burst into tears. Seeing this, the comments were somewhat sympathetic. The supporting actress treats her own son like this. How cruel. After what she did back then, it's understandable that she wouldn't acknowledge her son now. She's self-aware. After my failed strategy, I left the Eastern Palace right after giving birth. I was in a daze, and it took me several years of recuperation before I finally recovered. I opened this bun shop in a remote suburb of Beijing. It was late autumn, the nights thick with dew. After much hesitation, I finally opened the door and let the person in. The child's eyes were still red when he entered. He wiped his tear-stained face fiercely with his hands, then glared at me fiercely, as if he had suffered a great injustice. My heart ached, and I sighed softly, closing the door. As I turned around, the little thing raised its chin and barked at me in a domineering tone. Lin Lu, I'm hungry. I didn't ask how he knew my name, but quietly heated up a basket of vegetarian buns. When the buns were served, the child put down his chopsticks, grabbed a bun with his hands, and stuffed it into his mouth. I hadn't expected him to eat so poorly. I frowned slightly, but ultimately only managed to utter, "Eat slowly, be careful, it's hot." Seeing him take a bite of the bun, I carefully asked, "What's your name? Did you get lost? Where are your parents?" He chewed, his words mumbling, They call me Little Persimmon." I was about to ask more, but his face wrinkled, and he suddenly spat out the bun with a, "Wow. That's disgusting." The comments erupted in laughter. The heroine cooks a variety of delicious meals for her son every day, 9 meals a day, each different. How could the son possibly appreciate a shabby bun from the supporting actress? The sister really dotes on the son. So what can a mother do? Who understands? The supporting actress wouldn't even let the son eat a meat bun. How could there be such a mother? Watching Little Persimmon throw the buns on the ground with a look of disgust, I was speechless. I quietly cleared the table when I saw Little Persimmon rub his eyes and yawn loudly. I whispered, "If you're sleepy, go to bed and get some rest." Little Persimmon said, "Oh," then stretched out his arms, hands raised horizontally, a gesture as if waiting for the servants to help him undress. I suddenly felt a sense of powerlessness. How had Wei Zhizhao raised his child all these years, to have him become so spoiled and willful? After a long pause, I sighed softly and resignedly took off his coat. After a quick wash, I carried him to bed. Little Persimmon fluttered under the covers for a few moments before suddenly poking his head out and saying, "Lin Lu, give me a kiss." With that, he stared at me with his big, dark eyes wide open. I was speechless. "Dan, why do you want me to kiss you?" Little Persimmon was confused at first, then turned furious. Children always ask their mothers for hugs and kisses before going to bed. How can you be so stupid? You don't even know that. I looked at him and asked, "What about your mother?" Little Persimmon was stunned, then turned away. Of course my mother would kiss me too. I nodded gently. Yes, I'll take you to the capital tomorrow to report to the authorities. When you get home, you can let your mother kiss you. Little Persimmon glared at me for a long time, then angrily covered his head with the quilt and ignored me. Late at night. I was so upset that I couldn't sleep for once. I was just closing my eyes, pretending to doze, when the little thing sleeping on the other side of the bed suddenly stirred. It quietly got up and stared at my sleeping face for a long time. I heard him mutter softly. Yes, it's exactly like the painting. Then why? I could almost imagine what he was going to ask. Why did he turn him away? Why couldn't I make his favorite snacks? Even, why did he abandon him in his infancy and walk away so decisively? But in the end, he simply leaned against me and lay down, his forehead gently touching my lips. The moment we touched, we parted. In the darkness, I lay motionless, my breathing shallow. It was a long time before warm tears silently wet my hair. 3. In my dream, I returned to the day my conquest began. Back then, I had just made a deal with the system, being transported to this unfamiliar dynasty. I conquered the villain and gained heart points. In exchange, the system extended the life of my seriously ill relative in the real world. In a dark alley, a young man, covered in blood, collapsed to the ground. His face was pale, yet a strange expression remained. The system excitedly stated, "He is the villain Wei Jiuzhao, the 9th Prince of Wei." Wei Jiuzhao was sent as a hostage to the enemy kingdom since childhood. Now, with war imminent, he seeks to escape back to Wei, but is repeatedly assassinated. Now that he is seriously injured, it's a perfect opportunity for you to exploit the situation. I nodded and began to examine Wei Jiuzhao's injuries. As I bandaged the wound around his waist, I suddenly felt a chill on my neck. A dagger had silently pressed against my throat. I froze in place. The next second, the tip of the knife pressed against my jaw, lifting it upward. I was forced to look up, and the moment I did, I was met with a pair of dark eyes. Another so-called conqueror? Wei Jiuzhao's face darkened, his tone tinged with sarcasm. What's your trick this time? Are you using sweet nothings to trick me again? To complete your so-called conquer mission? Only then did the system say, guiltily. I forgot to mention that the Lord God sent 8 conquerors before. But without exception, they all died at the hands of the villains. Me. Before I could even think of a response, the dagger approached again, leaving a bloody mark on my neck. Wei Jiuzhao demanded coldly. Don't you know how to speak when someone asks you a question? I was silent for a moment, then gently took his hand. As I moved, the dagger sliced through my skin, and warm blood flowed down. My face remained calm, as if completely unaware, as I wrote, stroke by stroke, on Wei Jiuzhao's palm. Sorry. I can't speak. Did I hurt you just now? Wei Jiuzhao was stunned. A mute? He tooted, a rare flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Wei Jiuzhao's men arrived quickly. After examining his injuries, they helped Wei Jiuzhao onto a carriage. Among the arrivals was a middle-aged man with a small mustache. I later learned that his name was Gongsun Yan, a retainer of Wei Jiuzhao's, a man of unparalleled wisdom and ability. It was the young lady who saved the master. Gongsun Yan thanked me with a smile, but his eyes turned to Wei Jiuzhao asking for his approval to silence her. Behind him, several secret guards quietly placed their hands on the hilts of their swords. I silently clutched the corners of my clothes. Wei Jiuzhao remained silent, merely glancing at me before closing his eyes wearily. Finally, Gongsun Yan took me to another carriage. I was exhausted and quickly fell asleep. Half asleep, half awake, I heard Gongsun Yan sigh, this little girl is truly blessed. 4. Later, I followed Wei Jiuzhao all the way, helping boil water, cook, sew clothes, and make slippers. Gradually, I became familiar with everyone under Wei Jiuzhao's command. I wasn't lying about my muteness. Before transmigrating into the book, I grew up in an orphanage. When I was 10, I was locked in a cupboard for an entire night. After that, I lost my ability to speak and developed severe claustrophobia. I couldn't understand why the system had chosen me after all. I'm quiet and reserved, and mute, not the warm, welcoming little son in the books who easily becomes everyone's favorite. Gongsun Yan examined my throat but only said, Miss Lin's muteness is indeed a difficult problem. I'm afraid we'll have to wait until we reach the capital to find a renowned doctor. The journey from the border city of Moching back to Xinjing was fraught with danger. Wei Zhou's identity was sensitive. When the two countries were on good terms, he was a hostage no one wanted. Now that they were at odds, countless eyes were fixed on Wei Zhou after all. His death was the perfect trigger for war. Caught at the center of this turbulent situation, Wei Zhou not only had to guard against assassination attempts, but also had to negotiate with various factions, test their tactics, and win over their hearts. It was a truly exhausting task. Summer night. When I entered the carriage carrying my food box, Wei Zhou was taking a nap with his eyes closed. In the light of the lamp, he leaned against a low table, his forehead resting on his fist, revealing a certain vulnerability. It was then that I suddenly realized. The usually ruthless villain was actually just a teenager. Looking at the pale blue in Wei Zhou's eyes, I suddenly felt a pang of heartache. For some reason, I sat down beside him and gently helped him lie down, letting his head rest on my lap. I thought this way, he might sleep more peacefully. The next morning, when Wei Zhou woke up, he happened to meet my eyes. I smiled at him, sleepy-eyed, and then I was kicked off the carriage. Shameless, Wei Zhou said coldly. He then ordered Mr. Gongsun to enter the carriage, saying he wanted to discuss matters. I was confused, my legs numb, so I simply eavesdropped from the side of the carriage. In the carriage, Wei Zhou said angrily. It's all right that she's completely undisciplined about sex. Now, she's actually taken advantage of my unpreparedness and done something like this. Mr. Gongsun was curious, what treasonous thing did Miss Lin do? Wei Zhou was silent for a moment, then she smiled at me. Mr. Gongsun suddenly laughed. Master, have you ever heard of, when you meet a gentleman, how can you not be pleased? As the saying goes, young men admire their lovers. It's only natural for Miss Lin to admire you. Wei Zhou. Amid Mr. Gongsun's hearty laughter, Wei Zhou, his ears reddening, flung open the carriage curtain, jumped out, and stared at me, who had been eavesdropping. He took a deep breath and said coldly. Lin Lu, I know what you feel for me. I know. But for the time being, don't even think I'll respond, and don't try to tease me anymore. I opened my mouth wide, pointed at myself, and blinked. What I meant was me. Wei Zhou tooted, then stop being a spoiled brat. Me. At the same time, system notifications kept popping up. Heartbeat Zhengyi. Heartbeat Zheng Wu. Near the capital, we encountered a brutal assassination attempt. That night, 5 secret guards died protecting their master. Some of them had given me candy, others had asked me to mend their clothes. Wei Zhou personally interrogated the captured assassins, using torture to extract information about the power behind them, the Su family of the capital. And the Queen of Wei, Wei Zhou's biological mother, was none other than the Su family's legitimate daughter. As he dispatched the assassin with a single blow, Wei Zhou's eyes grew gloomy, almost terrifying. He slowly wiped the blood from his eyes and chuckled to himself, oh, I should have expected this. After the assassination, we were forced to take a more remote waterway. Autumn and winter. The reeds along the riverbank were covered in frost, and Wei Zhou grew increasingly silent. At this moment, the system inopportunely issued a task. Villain heartbeat value, 40%. Complete the kissing mission and double your points reward. In the cabin. Hot wine simmered in a small red clay stove. Amid the crackling fire, I hesitantly pulled something from my purse and handed it to Wei Zhou. It was a small deer woven from reed stalks. Seeing Wei Zhou frown, I quickly dipped my fingertips in tea and wrote on the low table, for you. Wei Zhou's face was as gloomy as water. He stared at the deer in my hand for a long moment before speaking. The last woman who coaxed me with such a trifle. To protect her eldest son, she tricked me, then 6 years old, into riding on a sedan chair on a diplomatic mission. What about you, Lin Lu? What's your intention? Suspecting he was using the situation as an excuse, I retorted. Mr. Gongsun and the others also sent you gifts. Wei Zhou said, they pledged their loyalty to me for a better future. Do you seek the same things as them? I was speechless for a moment, subconsciously lowering my gaze, avoiding them. Same? Probably different. I came here on a strategy mission, and my motives were impure from the start. I deceived Wei Jiuzhao, then deceived myself by being nice to him, hoping to make some ridiculous amends. At this point, I was terribly panicked and instinctively tried to escape, but Wei Jiuzhao grabbed my wrist. I finally realized that something was wrong with Wei Jiuzhao. He leaned in, almost stubbornly trying to confirm something. Lin Lu, what do you want from me by being nice to me? The system notification chimed in. Kissing mission is about to expire. Countdown 10, 9. Frightened, I looked up, my gaze instinctively flicking to his lips. Wei Jiuzhao was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. You really are so audacious. Before I could explain, a wave suddenly hit, rocking the entire boat. I lost my balance, lurched, and fell towards Wei Jiuzhao. Bill. I was woken by a pair of small hands. Seeing me awake, little Persimmon frowned and asked, Lin Lu, why are you crying? I stared at him blankly, then saw the bright light outside the window. Then it dawned on me. I was no longer in the East Palace, let alone on that rocking boat. I wiped the tears from my eyes and shook my head gently. It's okay. Little Persimmon gave me a suspicious look, then unceremoniously urged me to help him wash, dress, and prepare his meals. Breakfast was meat buns and rice porridge. Little Persimmon was picky, taking only a bite of each dish and leaving it there, leaving the food all over the floor. I was a little angry and ordered him to feed the wasted food to the chickens. Little Persimmon was reluctant at first, but upon hearing about the chickens, she excitedly ran to the backyard. I was clearing the table when Aunt Wang arrived, carrying a basket of fruits. She was a familiar neighbor. Back then, I was able to buy a bun shop outside Beijing thanks to Aunt Wang's help. She's been obsessed with trying to match me up with Lu Erniu, the owner of the pork shop. Now, she's warmly holding my hand and chatting about family matters, her every conversation revolving around Lu Erniu. He's strong, honest, and lives nearby. Aunt Wang slapped her thigh and said, just pack up and you can get married that same day. It's so convenient. The comments suddenly clicked. So the supporting actress is getting remarried. No wonder she's so cold to Zizi. Suddenly, it occurred to me, didn't the supporting actress and the villain divorce back then? How would Mei Dao become the crown princess then? It's not a big deal, it's just a divorce letter. I was just trying to put Aunt Wang off when Xiao Shizi, who had just finished feeding the chickens, rushed in like a calf. He angrily attacked Aunt Wang. You wicked person. You're the one who wants to force Lin Lu to marry. Aunt Wang was startled. Where did this pretty kid come from? I could only vaguely say he was the son of an old friend and was staying for the day. Seeing Xiao Shizi glaring at her with hostility, Aunt Wang couldn't help but tease. You don't allow Lin Lu to marry? But she's a lonely girl. She needs to get married so others won't bully her. After finally seeing Aunt Wang off, I took Xiao Shizi with me on the ox cart to the market in the capital. Xiao Shizi's face was sullen the whole way. Until we arrived in the bustling capital, I worried about getting separated, so I took his hand. He finally hummed twice and relaxed his frown. He skipped along, overflowing with curiosity, wanting to buy everything he saw. Seeing an old man selling vegetables on the street with 2 large black dogs, he wanted to buy them home to keep as guardians for me. I said helplessly, the dogs are my grandfather's, he won't sell them. Little Persimmon thought for a moment, then insisted on buying the old man home to keep as well. Me. We stopped and started along the way, and it took us a while to reach the gates of the imperial city. I glanced at Little Persimmon, who was tilting his head in thought at a small stall, and turned to whisper to the guard at the gate. Xiaohu for document anti-piracy protection, choose Xiaohu for book robots. It's reliable, and you won't fall into traps. Sir, may I know if His Royal Highness has left court? The guard had originally looked impatient. His Royal Highness is preparing for his wedding. Who are you? Before he finished his words, he caught sight of Little Persimmon behind me, and his expression suddenly changed. He whispered something to another guard, then scurried into the imperial city. A moment later, a commotion emanated from the palace corridor. Little Tiger, documents protected against piracy, find, books machines people select Little Tiger, stable reliable don't fall into traps. A group of palace servants, surrounding a petite woman in pink, was rushing towards us in a mighty procession. I pulled little Persimmon over. Let's play a game, okay? His eyes lit up, but he still looked cocky. How? I smiled and said, close your eyes now and count down to 10. When you open your eyes, I'll give you a gift, okay? Little Persimmon nodded in agreement, then said a bit shyly. Actually, I have a gift for you too. Never mind, I'll give it to you later. With that, little Persimmon covered his eyes and impatiently began counting out loud. 10, 9. I stood up, took one last look at little Persimmon, and then turned to leave. I figured this would be the last time we'd see each other. I hadn't walked far when I heard a charming, sweet voice behind me. Young master. Young master. Where have you been? It's been so hard to find you. I quickened my pace, blending into the crowd. As I turned the corner, heart-wrenching cries rang out from the city gate. She lied to me. Wow, Dad was right, Lin Lu is the ultimate liar. Bah! I don't know how long it took, but the cries were no longer distinct. In the alley. I slowly crouched against the wall, burying my face in my hands. Young lady. Suddenly, someone gently tapped my shoulder. I looked up. It was a woman dressed as a vendor. She handed me a small box. The young man you were with just now. He bought a box of lip balm from my shop, saying he was giving it as a gift. The woman explained that she had taken the money, turned around to get the goods, and when she looked back, she was gone. I blankly accepted the box of vermilion lip balm, forgetting even to say thank you. I suddenly remembered. Years ago, when I first arrived in Xinjiang, I seemed to have had a box of lip balm like this. Back then, we were exiled thousands of miles, dodging 18 assassination attempts, and trekking all the way from the border to Xinjiang. On our first day in Beijing, Wei Zhuzhao took me to see renowned doctors, but the answer we received was always, the girl's muteness is a heart disease, incurable. I wasn't too disappointed. How could a disease that modern medicine couldn't cure be cured in ancient times? Perhaps to comfort me, Wei Zhuzhao promised me a wish. His face remained stern, but his words were, Lin Lu, whatever you ask for, I will grant it. I was overjoyed, so I dragged Wei Zhuzhao along to buy a box of vermilion lip balm. While trying on my makeup, I smiled at Wei Zhuzhao. At that moment, the system prompted. Villain heartbeat value, 60%. The capital seemed calm, but undercurrents surged. The emperor's attitude toward Wei Zhuzhao's return was unclear, and he simply ordered the second prince to house him in the inn until he could see him. Little Hu bot document anti-piracy, find books machines people select Little Hu, stable reliable, no pitfalls. In one afternoon, drizzling, a distinguished guest arrived. In addition to the second prince, a daughter of a Shaoqing family also arrived. It was rumored that the current emperor intended to appoint her as Wei Zhuzhao's principal wife. 3 rounds of wine passed. The daughter of the junior official, wearing a veil, then spoke leisurely. Your Highnesses, my shoes and socks are wet. May I change my clothes first? After she left, the drunken second prince put his arm around Wei Zhuzhao's shoulders and laughed heartily. This woman has been pestering me to marry her. But her reputation for meanness and jealousy is well known in the capital. I despise her. Hearing this, Wei Zhuzhao also laughed, his attitude respectful and gentle, as if he felt no humiliation at all. The junior official's daughter wanted to change clothes. As the only woman here, she was naturally led to my guest room. When we were alone in the room, she suddenly asked, Are you the 9th prince's concubine? When I shook my head, she ordered me to fetch some clean clothes. When I entered the room with the clothes, I found her sitting at her dressing table, playing with the box of lip balm I had been reluctant to use. She opened the small box and dabbed a little vermilion on her fingertip. Tianxiangla's lip balm is the best in the capital. But this color is too gaudy. I'm afraid only common women would like it. She smiled and put down the lip balm box. It's not worthy of adding to my makeup. 9. Wei Zhuzhao and the second prince were like brothers, drinking and chatting happily until late at night. Before leaving the inn, the second prince still reminded him with a thick tongue. 9th brother, tomorrow we will see the emperor. You must say a few good words for me. Wei Zhuzhao readily agreed. After watching the second prince and his group leave, he slowly put away his smile. The next day, before entering the palace, Wei Zhuzhao, dressed in a white robe and jade crown, exuded a cool and noble air. The spring chill was still chilly, and I, considering Wei Zhuzhao's recent injury, specially prepared a black fox cloak. He took the cloak with one hand, then suddenly pressed hard against his wound with the other. Blood oozed rapidly from the wound, staining his robe red. I gasped in shock and instinctively tried to stop him, but Wei Zhuzhao grabbed my wrist. He looked at me, a hint of a smile in his usually stern eyes. The next second, Wei Zhuzhao raised his bloodied fingertips and brushed them against my lips. He said, "Don't listen to her nonsense. She's clearly beautiful." It said that on the day of his audience with the emperor. In full view of all the ministers, the ninth prince collapsed from exhaustion after presenting the enemy's most confidential city defense map. The imperial physician was urgently summoned to the throne room. They untied the ninth prince's robe and revealed a horrific bloodstain beneath. The ninth prince only managed to cry out, "Someone is trying to kill me, father, save me," before he fainted. The ministers were in an uproar. A prince who had made outstanding contributions on a diplomatic mission was assassinated and seriously injured in the heavily guarded capital, enough to infuriate the emperor. The second prince kowtowed repeatedly in fear. When I reported yesterday, he was clearly still fine. "Father, please understand." A city defense map, coupled with a self-torture tactic, allowed Wei Zhuzhao to gain a firm foothold in the court. The second prince's incompetence had lost the emperor's favor. After arranging a marriage for him with the daughter of a junior minister, the emperor exiled him to the capital. The emperor conferred the title of princely on Wei Zhuzhao and bestowed upon him a stone plaque as a token of his favor. Wei Zhuzhao glanced at it indifferently and scoffed. "Princely, the stone plaque, it has the character Li on it." "Father, this is a warning to me, to help His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Wei Chen, the Crown Prince of Wei, is the protagonist of this world." He was Wei Zhuzhao's older brother, a gentle and kind-hearted man, lacking a sharp edge. And now, the emperor wanted Wei Zhuzhao to be a whetstone, sharpening the crown prince's courage. Wei Zhuzhao had indeed lived up to the emperor's expectations. From water conservancy and canal construction to historical research and sacrifices, he outperformed the crown prince in every aspect. The crown prince's faction initially disdained to contend. After all, no matter how brilliant Wei Zhuzhao might be, the court struggles were minor, and military power was paramount. But when news arrived from the border that Wei Zhuzhao had captured 10 enemy cities in a row, some finally became restless. The night Wei Zhuzhao returned victorious, Emperor Gongsun was delighted. "Master, now that you have command of the military, you may rest in peace." Prince Li's mansion. Wei Zhuzhao was preparing to report to the palace. I escorted him to the palace gate and, as I was about to tie his outer robe, caught a glimpse of a cold light in my peripheral vision. The next second, a sound of air breaking through was heard. Whoosh! In a flash, Wei Zhuzhao pulled me into his arms, protecting me beneath him. At the same time, the system prompted. Villain's heartbeat value, 80%. I didn't have time to respond. I hurriedly stood up to support Wei Zhuzhao, but my palm felt wet and warm. He had been struck by an arrow in the back of his heart. Under the moonlight, looking at Wei Zhuzhao's pale face in my arms, my lips trembled, my throat choked, and my heart nearly ached. "Wei Zhuzhao, don't die." Wei Zhuzhao had been unconscious for 3 days, and I had been guarding him for 3 days. That poison-filled arrow was originally aimed at me. If Wei Zhuzhao hadn't blocked it, I would have been in grave danger. When Wei Zhuzhao woke up, with tears in my eyes, I asked him, "Why did you take the blame for me?" He didn't answer, just stared at me intently. "Can you speak now?" My voice was tinged with tears. "Yes." Wei Zhuzhao looked at me for a long time, then suddenly took my hand. He placed something in my palm, the reed deer I had given him earlier. After so long, the deer's edges had begun to brittle. Wei Zhuzhao looked at me with a blazing gaze. "Now I have the strength to fight for you. Lin Lu, I want to marry you. Will you marry me and be my wife? If you follow me, I will definitely treat you well." Lu Ernie smiled innocently and stuffed a basket of pork into my arms. I had a headache. Ever since Aunt Wang came to propose marriage, Lu Ernia had been coming to my house to give me gifts for 3 days in a row. The people in this village are simple and honest, and their values are conservative. Knowing I'd been married before and had children, they assumed I was marrying above my station by marrying Lu Erniu, a first-time bride. They had good intentions, intent on facilitating this good thing for me, but they never considered I truly didn't want to get married. I was about to politely decline when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and Xiao Shizi swaggered in. Seeing I had a visitor, Lu Ernia stood up and excused himself. Xiao Shizi snorted, "He's sensible," then untied a backpack from his back. He pulled out a few sets of clothes, tossed them casually on the ground, and thrust a square object at me. Xiao Shizi said smugly, "Lin Lu, take it. With this, no one will dare bully you." Looking at the seal of the Eastern Palace in my hand, I was speechless. If Xiao Shizi's visit last time was an accident, then what was going on this time? Are all the guards in the Eastern Palace freeloaders? I frowned at Xiao Shizi and pursed my lips. Why are you back again? Where's your father? When I mentioned Wei Jiuzhao, Xiao Shizi pouted. Humph, I don't like him. He's so mean and doesn't care about me at all. Every time he gets annoyed with me, he locks me up or leaves me with someone else. I frowned slowly, feeling a sudden sense of emptiness inside. Is it because my wedding is approaching that Wei Jiuzhao has allowed Xiao Shizi to come to me so many times? It was Wei Jiuzhao who insisted on having a child back then, but now he doesn't plan to raise one. Just as my heart was pounding, Xiao Shizi pulled out a bamboo horse and a small wooden sword from his bag. Mounted on the horse, sword in hand, he rushed into the courtyard, yelling and hacking at the sparrows, sending them flying. What I heard him yell was, "With Ben Shizi here, who dares to bully Lin Lu?" When a sparrow pooped on his head, little Shizi was so angry he pointed to the sky and cursed. "Dan, you idiot, just wait. I'm going to fill your nest with cuckoo eggs." After his outburst, he ran back to me and looked at me expectantly, his eyes gleaming with surprise. Before I could react, I heard him impatiently urging. "You said I'm so good at everything. Lin Lu, tell me now." Me. After finally coaxing little Shizi off to play by himself, I dug out my money box from my bedside table and began to wonder if the money I'd saved over the past 2 years would be enough to raise a child. Before I finished counting, I heard a sharp cry from the yard. 12. In the yard. Little Shizi's face was sullen. At his feet sat a crying little girl, Auntie Wang's 5-year-old granddaughter, Fubeo. It took me a while to figure out what had happened. Aunt Wang and I were neighbors, often sharing a few scallions or eggs. Just now, Fubao came to our chicken coop to get some eggs, but was caught red-handed by Zayashizi, who was patrolling his territory. "Thief! How dare you cry?" Zayashizi scolded. Fubao screamed, "I'm not a thief." When the little girl looked up, I saw blood trickling down her forehead. My face immediately darkened, and I said to Zayashizi, "Apologize." Zayashizi was incredulous. "I'm protecting you, and you're defending a thief." I said sternly, "No matter what, you shouldn't just hit someone without knowing the truth. Apologize to Fubao." "Dian you." Zayashizi looked at me, her mouth suddenly pouting, her eyes instantly red. The comments immediately exploded. Is she sick? What did Zizi do wrong? I'm convinced. Zai is the crown prince, and he truly has the throne to inherit. Forget about hitting people, he can kill anyone he wants. Why is the supporting actress making such a fuss? I took a deep breath, squatted down, and looked Xiao Shizi in the face. Listen up. If you want to follow me, you're not allowed to lose your temper or hit people anymore. You also have to break those bad habits, learn to eat well, and dress yourself. Now, apologize to Fubao. Xiao Shizi, holding back tears, looked at me, then at Fubao, who had hidden behind me, and burst into tears. My head ached, and I was about to continue reasoning when I heard a soft, sweet voice exclaim, "Oh, what's going on?" I frowned and looked up, only to see a procession of carriages and horses parked outside the courtyard. A woman in a brocade gown of imperial color descended from the carriage. She pushed open the small courtyard's wooden gate and walked quickly, her face filled with worry. The comments were overjoyed. Here she comes. The heroine's precious sister, Su Wanwan, is finally here. Seeing Su Wanwan, little Persimmon cried even louder. Su Wanwan immediately pulled him to her side, her heart aching. She took out a handkerchief and wiped his tears, coaxing him softly. Who angered the crown prince? Sister Su will punish her for you, okay? I squinted my eyes and looked at the carriage outside. A gentle breeze blew the curtains off the window, revealing a familiar, handsome face. Inside the carriage, Wei Zhuzhao, dressed in a moon-white robe, lowered his eyes to read a memorial. His knuckles twisted the paper, his eyes calm, as if oblivious to the drama outside. At this moment, little Persimmon had finally cried enough. He hiccuped and cried out, Lin Lu, I don't want you anymore. I was almost laughing with anger. I strode into the house, picked up the bag that Xiao Shizi had brought, and stuffed all his things back. Back in the courtyard, I dropped the bag at his and Su Wanwan's feet. Then please. TBC. 13. Xiao Shizi and Su Wanwan were both stunned. Seeing my firm stance, Su Wanwan forced a weak smile. Miss Lin, don't misunderstand me. I didn't mean anything else. I interrupted her. You're here to take him back, right? Miss Su, thank you for taking care of him all these years. But a child his age only needs 3 meals on time. There's really no need for 9 meals a day. The comments flew. Is this woman provoking? Is there anything wrong with Wanwan giving her child good food and drink? Does this scheming female supporting character think everyone is a parent as controlling as she is? Chinese education, you win again. Ignoring her, she continued calmly. Also, children shouldn't eat too much before bed, especially meat. It's easy to get bloated, and if you keep doing this, you won't grow taller. Su Wanwan stared at me, her eyes wide open. It took a long time before she looked away. She bit her lower lip and said, Miss Lin, I naturally hope for the best for the young master. But when he cries, it's so pitiful. My heart aches, and I can't help it. Because of her heartache, she indulged him in bad habits. Because of her heartache, she allowed him to get hurt while playing, but instead of teaching him the right way, she punished him by making him kneel and serve as a servant. If this continues, what kind of person will little Persimmon become? A lazy, undisciplined, and overbearing dandy? I pursed my lips and looked over at little Persimmon. He was so small, he was still standing there, staring blankly at the backpack on the ground with red eyes. I took a deep breath and was about to speak when Su Wanwan suddenly took a few steps closer. She leaned over to me and said in a low voice, if Miss Lin truly cares about the Crown Prince, I could report to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and ask for some leniency. Let you serve as a maid in the Eastern Palace, so you can be with the Crown Prince day and night. I was stunned, then slowly shook my head, no need. What happened back then was too ugly. If it weren't for the child, I'm afraid Wei Zhuzhao would never want to see me again. I instinctively glanced at the carriage outside the courtyard. The curtains had been drawn, and the figure inside was no longer clear. I suddenly felt tired. I looked away and was about to see her off when I saw Xiao Shizi silently pick up the backpack from the ground. He clumsily stuffed the items that had fallen out of the backpack back into place, then walked back into the house. Su Wanwan instinctively grabbed him. Young master, did you forget something? I can get it for you. Little Persimmon lowered his head and whispered, I'm not going back. After saying that, he cautiously glanced up at me. I pursed my lips and said nothing. Seeing I showed no sign of relenting, little Persimmon sniffed and said dejectedly, Dear okay, Lin Lu, I promised to apologize, isn't that enough? 14. Su Wanwan was incredulous. Young master, are you planning to stay here? But this is a remote place, with no servants to serve you. And, Dian, what if you want to eat the snacks I made tonight? Little Persimmon didn't answer, but shook his head absently. He thought for a moment, then pulled the small wooden sword from his backpack and handed it to Su Wanwan with a pained look on his face. Dian, take this back, too. The small wooden sword was still stained with a little blood from the wound he'd just inflicted on Fu Bao. Little Persimmon whispered, Lin Lu will be furious if he sees this. Su Wanwan. The comments were almost entirely filled with complaints for Su Wanwan. Wu, Mei Bao was with Zizi for a whole year after all, how could he treat her like this? What kind of drug did Lin Lu give Zizi? The plot is completely ruined. Have you guys read too many online novels? This is a clear setup for a mother-chasing spree. Watching little Persimmon carrying her backpack back to the cabin, Su Wanwan's expression darkened. She looked me up and down imperceptibly, then put on a businesslike expression. Miss Lin, the Crown Prince is too playful to leave. But please return His Royal Highness's regent seal. After a while, an old eunuch respectfully held the seal of the Eastern Palace I had just given him and returned it intact. Puzzled, Dian, what is this? The old eunuch smiled flatteringly. Miss Lin, His Royal Highness has finished using it and asked me to return it to you. Your Highness said since it's a gift from the Crown Prince, it's yours. I took the seal and, looking at the procession of carriages departing outside the courtyard, slowly frowned. What did Wei Jiuzhao mean by this? Just leaving like that? So, he just came to get the stamp. Before dinner, I carried a basket of eggs and Xiao Shizhi to Aunt Wang's house next door. Looking at Fu Bao hiding behind Aunt Wang, Xiao Shizhi hesitated for a long time before mumbling softly, I'm sorry. I squeezed his palm, tell me clearly why you're apologizing. Aunt Wang hurried to smooth things over. It's just kids playing around. There's no need, no need. I remained silent, just staring at Xiao Shizhi. Seeing he couldn't fool her, he finally said weakly. Lin Lu just told me you're not a thief. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have just hit someone without asking. Fu Bao blinked timidly, then reached out and handed Xiao Shizhi a piece of pork jerky. Little brother, this is for you. This was forgiveness. Xiao Shizhi took the jerky and took a large bite filled with resentment. The sound of his mouth crunched, as if he held some deep grudge against it. Aunt Wang loved children, especially little Persimmon, who was so pretty and lovable. Seeing her, she couldn't help but praise him. This little one may be a little mean, but he has really good teeth. Why don't you stay for dinner? Little Persimmon couldn't stay idle. After finishing the pork bun, he ran to the yard to chase sparrows. Fu Bao, standing nearby, bravely asked, Brother Persimmon, why are you chasing the little sparrows? Little Persimmon looked displeased, none of your business. Before he could finish his words, he instinctively glanced at me, sitting by the door picking vegetables, and the words on his lips changed to, Dianhuf, because they're just like you, very noisy. Fu Bao's eyes rolled. Brother Persimmon, do you know what the little sparrows are chirping about? When little Persimmon didn't respond, Fu Bao continued. When the sparrow mother asks the baby sparrow how they want their hair done, the little sparrow says, chirp chirp. Fu Bao, who had amused many people with this joke, now looked at little Persimmon expectantly. Little Persimmon rolled her eyes. So boring. Fu Bao was deeply frustrated and a bit listless during dinner. Little Persimmon, on the other hand, had a hearty appetite, finishing 2 bowls by herself. Shoo! Little Persimmon loved to play. Every afternoon he'd run out and run wild climbing trees, robbing bird nests, catching loaches, fighting crickets. It only took him a few days to become the king of the children. The village kids all respectfully called him Master Persimmon. Children his age consume a lot of energy, but he simply didn't eat well. Not only was he picky about food, but he also ate based on his mood after all. Whenever he was hungry, the servants would always be there to serve him. I insisted on 3 meals a day, at regular times and fixed amounts. If he didn't eat well, he'd have to go hungry. So, he'd often wake up in the middle of the night, hungry. Lin Lu, I'm so hungry, so hungry, so hungry. If I ignored him, he'd kick his legs in frustration on his bed. I'm really hungry. Lin Lu, are you trying to starve me to death so my father doesn't have an heirloom? His little mouth kept chattering. If you put cabbage and pork in his mouth, he'd whip it into bun filling with a bang. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. During these days together, I've also discovered that this child is someone who responds to soft words rather than harsh ones. So, I had no choice but to pull him into my arms, sleepily, and gently soothe him. If you're hungry, just recite your lessons. Reciting won't make you hungry anymore. At this point, little Persimmon would hesitate for a moment, then recite in his tender voice, word by word. Reeds grow thick, white dew turns to frost. Braised pork elbow, lotus root and pork rib soup. After developing the habit of eating well, little Persimmon's daily routine gradually became regular. Early in the morning, he joined me at the stall. The bun shop. At dawn, the steamed buns stacked like a tower in the shop began to emit sweet white steam. After the busiest morning hours had passed, little Persimmon would sneak up and gently tug at the corner of my clothes. Lin Lu. I turned around and saw his face flushed red, his lips pouting in anger. Looking down again, I saw not only was little Persimmon's hair disheveled, but his clothes were also askew and messy, with one shoulder completely exposed while the other was tightly wrapped. It looked as if he had just had a fight with this clothing. And lost. I was speechless for a moment, then I remembered. This morning, when I got up and rushed to set up my stall, I casually told little Persimmon to wash and dress himself while I went to knead dough and light the fire. I had no idea the child had gotten himself into this state. I was at a loss for words, so I washed my hands and squatted down in front of little Persimmon. I looked up at him. It's great that you're willing to dress yourself today. You don't know how, I'll teach you. Learn well, and you'll be able to dress yourself in the future. I untied the wrongly tied belts on his robe one by one, slowly and meticulously demonstrating how to tie them again. Little Persimmon frowned, watching intently. The comments were arguing fiercely. Zizizi is the crown prince, he'll have someone to serve him his whole life. Is learning all this unnecessary? Just a quick aside, I have a child myself, and I believe my child must have basic self-care skills no matter what. I didn't dare to say this before. Doesn't anyone think the heroine is deliberately spoiling her child? What if she becomes the crown princess and has her own child? Is the person who started the fight earlier insane? Wanwan is so kind, she'll treat her child well even if she has her own child. After getting dressed, the next step was tying her hair. In front of the bronze mirror. Little Persimmon swung his feet in the chair and suddenly urged excitedly, Linlo, ask me how I want my hair done. I didn't understand, but I obeyed anyway. Okay, how do you want it done? Little Persimmon looked at me, his eyes sparkling. He said, chirp. And so, he got his wish, and got 2 towering braids. 16. That morning. As usual, I was busy steaming and selling buns, collecting money, and doing the accounting. I was completely occupied. Little Persimmon got up and not only clumsily dressed, but also skillfully picked up the copper basin and began to wash himself. Perhaps the basin was a little too big for him, as he accidentally wet the front of his clothes. Little Persimmon sighed, frowning as he reached for a handkerchief to wipe his wet clothes. He had just finished packing when he looked up and saw Fubao outside the bun shop, tilting her head and looking at him. Feeling discovered, Fubao gave a shy smile and turned away. Looking at her from behind, Xiao Shitzi asked in disbelief. Dian, was she just laughing at me? Before I could say anything, Xiao Shitzi screamed in anger. How dare you laugh at me? I was helping her earlier. She's dead. She's dead. I sighed and pulled out a string of candied haws from my back. Fubao is here to give this to you. I waved the candied haws in front of Xiao Shitzi. She said she's giving it to the brother who helped her chase away the big yellow dog at the village entrance yesterday. Who could it be? Xiao Shitzi blinked. Then he snatched the candied haws and mumbled reluctantly. Okay. Then she's resurrected. Afternoon. I was checking the calligraphy Xiao Shitzi had been practicing for the past few days when I saw him run home from outside with red eyes. Although Xiao Shitzi was noisy, he rarely cried in front of others. I put down the copybook and asked softly. Didn't you say you were going to Aunt Wang's house to play? What's wrong? Xiao Shitzi sniffed and suddenly asked. Lin Lu, are you really getting married? I was stunned, then heard him speak rapidly. The pork seller said that if you accepted his wedding dress, you agreed to marry him. My brows furrowed slightly, then my eyes fell on the clothes basket on the table. Yesterday, before closing the bun shop, Lu Ernia came to see me. He said he had some clothes he wanted me to mend. Lu Ernia was unmarried and a kind and honest man. The women in the neighborhood often lent a hand, mending his clothes and insoles. I agreed casually, not noticing the faint blush that crept across his dark face as he placed the basket in my hands. Now, I lifted the lining of the basket. And sure enough, I saw a pomegranate red skirt. It dawned on me then no wonder so many customers at the bun shop this morning were winking and congratulating me. Seeing this, little Persimmon threw herself into my arms, tears streaming down her face. Lin Lu, Daddy clearly said that as long as I cling to you, you won't marry. I was stunned. Dian what? And the little thing was practically gasping for breath. But Grandma Wang said Daddy isn't a good person. She said the first time she saw you, you fainted at her door before you even finished your confinement. Little Persimmon raised her tear-soaked face, her clear, tear-soaked eyes reflecting my bewildered face. Lin Lu, is Daddy really so bad to you? 17. On the day of my wedding to Wei Jiuzhao. As the maid painted the flower ornaments between my eyebrows, she sighed with envy. Princess, His Highness Prince Li treats you so well. That day, a grand procession of red wedding gowns, stretching 10 miles from Prince Li's palace gates, circled the capital, and was carried back in the evening. Because I was a mere orphan in this world, Wei Jiuzhao arranged an identity for me, the youngest daughter of Gong Sun Yan, whose surname was that of his deceased wife. At that time, Mr. Gongsun smiled, waving his feather fan, and said meaningfully, I never expected that my master would value me so highly. Wei Jiuzhao simply gave him a cold glance, you're too talkative. The wedding banquet was bustling with activity. The much-anticipated wedding of Prince Li was a constant stream of congratulatory guests. At that time, Wei Jiuzhao had defeated several princes in quick succession, and his relationship with the Crown Prince's faction had become quite strained. It was only at the end of the banquet that Crown Prince Wei Chun finally arrived. Through his red veil, I could only see the hem of a pale yellow robe. The Crown Prince said in a clear voice, Happy New Year, ninth brother. I'm late, so I'll drink a glass as a punishment. The Crown Prince's voice sounded strangely familiar, but before I could dwell on it, I was shoved into the bridal chamber by the boisterous guests. Later, the candlelight warmed the tent. When Wei Jiuzhao lifted her veil to kiss me, the system prompted. Villain's heartbeat value, 90%. 3 days after the wedding. As a lady of high rank, I entered the palace with Wei Jiuzhao to pay my respects to the emperor and empress. The emperor simply instructed me to assist him diligently and dismissed me with some precious jade. Empress Su consistently avoided us. Every time Wei Jiuzhao and I entered the palace for an audience, she either suffered a headache or caught a cold. But Wei Jiuzhao remained unfazed. She's always been like this. Don't worry. As the commander-in-chief, Wei Jiuzhao was dispatched to the frontier battlefield shortly after the wedding. 3 months later, a great victory was achieved at the border, and the enemy finally surrendered. A palace-wide banquet was held. As the commander-in-chief of the 3 armies, Wei Jiuzhao was at the peak of his powers. After the banquet, the emperor left Wei Jiuzhao alone for a late-night chat. I had intended to wait outside the main hall, but a palace maid holding a lamp approached, saying, Princess Li, the empress invites you. 18. Weiyang Palace. Seeing this graceful and beautiful woman, I finally understood the source of Wei Jiuzhao's exquisite face. I knelt on the steps for a cup of tea before Empress Su said calmly, Raise your head and let me see. After examining me for a moment, Empress Su chuckled softly. I heard you grew up among the common people. Xiaju, for some reason, just doesn't like those noble ladies. I heard the warning and silently lowered my head. Empress Su's voice was gentle, yet imbued with authority. He's always like this. He appears obedient, but he always harbors his own hidden agenda, constantly causing trouble for your majesty and me. You should try to persuade him more often. As I listened to Empress Su's admonition, my attention wandered. I've heard before that the current emperor and empress were once a young couple. During the year of their most affectionate relationship, the eldest prince, Wei Chun, was born and immediately crowned crown prince. During those years, the Weiyang Palace enjoyed unwavering favor and reigned supreme. But the emperor's favor was fleeting. After several selections for concubines, the Weiyang Palace gradually declined in popularity. Watching the princes and princesses one after another. After the birth of her son, Empress Su, desperate for help, resorted to despicable tactics she had previously despised, ultimately becoming pregnant with her second child. Love can be so blinding that a noble woman, accustomed to the tragedies of the imperial harem, desperately sought to retain her husband's heart with a child. Empress Su's second pregnancy was unstable, and the delivery nearly cost her life. During her difficult labor, the emperor was painting the eyebrows of a newly appointed beauty under the moonlight. From then on, Empress Su finally lost hope. She channeled all her anger, resentment towards her husband onto the newborn. The child didn't even have a name since he was the 9th child. He was named Wei Jiu. It wasn't until the 9th prince was ordered on a diplomatic mission that the emperor, seeing the unrefined name, ordered the imperial household department to choose Zhao. Now, Empress Su tapped the edge of the table with her red hairpin, looking down at me. Now that we've achieved a great victory at the border, Prince Li should return the tiger talisman and serve the crown prince well in the future. You must also hurry to provide the royal family with an heir. A man, only with a child can he find peace of mind. In the past, they sent 6-year-old Wei Jiuzhao as a hostage to a hostile nation fraught with danger. Now, they're using him as a whetstone, and when his use is done, they'll take his military power away. I once asked the system why Wei Jiuzhao was a villain. The system's answer was, a villain is a villain because all his actions are motivated by hatred. I suddenly recalled the brutal assassination attempt on my escape many years ago. Back then, in a swaying boat, Wei Jiuzhao clutched my wrist, repeatedly demanding, "What do you want from me by being so kind to me?" I looked up at the woman in the upper seat, whose features bore a resemblance to Wei Jiuzhao's. They were clearly his closest relatives, the ones who should have loved him the most, yet they had 100 reasons not to love him. How could he not resent them? 19. I knelt for a full half-hour, my knees aching, before I heard a palace attendant announce, "His Royal Highness Prince Li has arrived." Wei Jiuzhao, dressed in wide-sleeved court robes, strode into the hall. As he bowed, his jade belt dangled unwaveringly, like a mountain tilted but unshaken. After a brief greeting, Wei Jiuzhao took my hand and said, "It's getting late. We shouldn't disturb your mother's rest any longer. I'll take a Lu back home first." Empress Su chuckled softly, covering her lips with her hands. "You say you won't disturb me, but you're really worried about the princess, aren't you? You've really grown up and know how to care for your wife." Wei Jiuzhao looked at me without refutation. "Well, she has a good throat and can't stand the strain." Hearing this, I coughed a few times so artificially that Wei Jiuzhao couldn't help but laugh and squeezed my palm. Empress Su looked at this scene with a dazed look, her gaze piercing us with a distant gaze, as if she were lost in some forgotten dream. Wei Jiuzhao and I were about to leave. Empress Su suddenly called out to him again. "I suddenly remembered that you loved playing with small toys when you were young. You seemed particularly fond of Koju." She forced a smile and waved to the servants around her. "I didn't give you any gifts for your wedding a while ago, fearing you wouldn't be happy. Now that you remember, go to the storehouse and get some of your childhood toys. Just keep them as a souvenir." Wei Jiuzhao's smile froze. "Mother, I'm mistaken. It's the crown prince who loves Koju." He suppressed the self-mockery in his eyes, his face pale. "I didn't have many toys when I was young. The only thing I used to play with was a rattle." Hearing this, a rare look of bewilderment crossed Empress Su's beautiful eyes. "Ah, is that so?" 20. After leaving Weiyang Palace, we hadn't walked far when Wei Jiuzhao suddenly stumbled. Startled, I quickly supported him. Only then did I notice the blood slowly seeping down Wei Jiuzhao's back. He supported me with some weakness, his face pale as snow, his brow furrowed as he struggled to suppress his breath. I trembled, covering my mouth with my hands, and whispered, what is going on?" The eunuch Li, who was serving beside him, was Wei Jiuzhao's subordinate. He explained softly, "The master has returned victorious, and his reputation has soared. Some soldiers in the army jokingly call the master the 9th prince." I was stunned for a moment, then a chill ran down my spine as I understood. Eunuch Li lowered his voice. When his majesty learned of this, he was furious and summoned the master to give him a lecture. He also used torture. I repeated, stunned, "Torture?" Eunuch Li nodded, "Flogging." Tonight was supposed to be Wei Jiuzhao's celebration banquet. But just because Wei Jiuzhao's military prominence surpassed the crown prince's, the emperor had him flogged. From the beginning to the end, no matter how brilliant Wei Jiuzhao was, the emperor only wanted him to be a sharpening stone. He wanted Wei Jiuzhao to compete with the crown prince, but he was also afraid that his sharpness would wear down the man he had designated as the heir apparent. Eunuch Li sighed. I originally wanted to escort your highness back home, but your highness was worried that the empress would embarrass you, so you came anyway. I took a deep breath, suppressing the trembling in my fingertips. I took off my fox fur coat and draped it over Wei Jiuzhao's shoulders, covering the blood on his back. I supported Wei Jiuzhao and slowly walked towards the palace gate. As we passed the imperial garden, I heard a voice. "Ninth brother?" Wei Jiuzhao's eyes glared. "It's the crown prince." Before I could react, Wei Jiuzhao had straightened his back again, a flawless smile instantly plastered across his face. He lowered his eyes and said respectfully, "Your Highness the Crown Prince." The Crown Prince approached us. "Ninth brother, you're in a refined mood. It's so late, and you're still admiring the flowers in the imperial garden?" A sudden surge of unease welled up within me. Why did the Crown Prince's voice sound so familiar? I suddenly turned around. The moment the dim palace lanterns illuminated the Crown Prince's face, my pupils shrank to the size of a pinpoint. When I was 10 years old, I was locked in a closet. Someone desperately overturned the group of children who were bullying me and rescued me from the darkness. At that time, with a bloody nose, he said to me, "Don't be afraid, little dear. Your brother is here." When I was 5, my parents died in a car accident. I lived with my brother, Lin Shen, who was 3 years older than me, in an orphanage. In high school, a fire broke out in the teaching building. I was trapped in an elevator about to lose control and fall. As firefighters pried open the elevator ceiling, other teachers and students climbed out. My claustrophobia struck, and I huddled in the corner of the elevator, trembling. At that moment, it was Lin Shen who jumped down the elevator shaft without hesitation. Coughing and weeping from the thick smoke, he struggled to pick me up, hoisting me high, and carrying me to the firefighters who came to rescue him. But just as he was about to climb back up, the elevator plummeted from the 3rd floor. To save the seriously injured and unconscious Lin Shen, I accepted the strategy mission without hesitation. And now, he stood before me, tall and graceful, dressed in a pale yellow robe. In a trance, I suddenly felt someone squeeze my palm. I had just come to my senses when Wei Jiuzhao asked in a deep voice, "What's wrong?" I instinctively glanced at the bewildered crown prince, then hurriedly lowered my head. "Nothing." 21. On the way back to the palace, I was completely distracted. For the first time, I lost my temper with the system, sharply questioning what was going on. What is the relationship between this world's protagonist, Wei Chen, and my brother, Lin Shen? Why do they look exactly alike? The system couldn't answer, so I had to consult the Lord God. Soon, the system came online again. I pressed again, "Did you drag Lin Shen's soul into this world, just like you did me?" The system was silent for a long moment. "Sorry, I can't rule out this possibility." In the carriage, Wei Jiuzhao was always incredibly attentive. He noticed my absent-mindedness and took my hand. "Did you get startled just now?" I flinched, then shook my head slightly and gave him a frantic smile. This time, after consulting the Lord God, the system also requested access to the subsequent plot. As this world's villain, Wei Jiuzhao will fight the protagonist, Wei Chen, to the death for the position of crown prince. And in the end Wei Chen narrowly triumphs. Wei Jiuzhao, a single misstep, is poisoned to death in the palace. Hearing this ending, I felt a chill run down my spine. Although I knew Wei Jiuzhao was a villain from the beginning, I didn't know the details, let alone such a tragic death. Seeing my trembling and pale face, the system quickly added, "Our original deal was you successfully capture the villain, bringing their heartbeat value to 100%. And we will restore your loved ones to health and return you to your original world." The system's voice gradually sank. "Because of this incident, I have requested special compensation from the Lord God. The Lord God has promised if the plot goes smoothly, after the villain is eliminated, the Lord God can resurrect him for you and erase his memories. You can leave the plot and spend your entire lives together in this world." My heart was in turmoil. As I stepped off the carriage, before I could even stand, my vision went black and I passed out. When I woke up, many people were gathered around my bed. I looked around blankly, struggling to get up. What happened? Wei Jiuzhao pushed me back onto the bed, his movements gentle but unyielding. He stared at me, his dark eyes gleaming brightly. "Lin Lu, you're pregnant." 22. The imperial physician beside me beamed. Congratulations, Princess Li. You're 3 months pregnant. Wei Jiuzhao raised his hand, reward. It dawned on me it was the night before Wei Jiuzhao left for battle. After everyone left, Wei Jiuzhao and I were alone in the room. I asked softly, "Dian, how's your injury?" Wei Jiuzhao reassured me, "Don't worry, I've applied medicine." My mind was in turmoil. I uttered an "oh," then silently turned over, facing Wei Jiuzhao, who sat on the edge of the bed. After a while, the bed sank. Wei Jiuzhao embraced me from behind, his warm breath falling behind my ear. He placed a hand on my belly, gently rubbing it, his cheek buried in the side of my neck. His voice was muffled, "Lin Lu, I'm going to be a father." I felt a little itchy, frowning and turning to glare at him, but suddenly I froze. I saw a smile on Wei Jiuzhao's lips, a smile as pure as a child's. He was a man of deep thoughts, never revealing his emotions. Over the years, I watched Wei Jiuzhao don a veneer of gentleness, orchestrating murderous schemes amidst laughter and conversation, gradually ascending to his current position of power. It seemed like he hadn't laughed this heartily in ages. I opened my mouth, hesitantly saying, "Dian Wei Jiuzhao, do you really want this child?" Wei Jiuzhao raised an eyebrow, "You don't?" Seeing my silence, he tightened his arms, holding me tighter with a domineering, childish air. "You can't help wanting it. Just give birth to it, and I'll raise it." I felt both amused and annoyed. Although I felt this child came at an inopportune time, I finally uttered a soft "hum." After a long silence, I finally spoke again. "Wei Jiuzhao, is it necessary to fight for the throne?" My voice was a little dry. "If we stay away from the fray, won't you be hurt again? And you won't lose? Let's find a secluded paradise. Wouldn't that be perfect?" Wei Jiuzhao stared at me intently. After a long moment, he lowered his head and solemnly kissed my trembling eyelashes. "Lin Lu, I will not lose. Even for you and the child, I will win beautifully." 23. While the situation in the capital was volatile, the prince's palace was peaceful. I was pregnant at the palace, well protected, yet I was rapidly losing weight from excessive worry. Wei Jiuzhao left early and returned late, but he visited my room every day. He always looked like a young man new to the world, his body still damp with night dew or morning breeze. He would carefully press his cheek against my belly, listening intently. That year, on the winter solstice, the crown prince, impeached for corruption, volunteered to march south to suppress bandits. Only a month after the crown prince left the capital, the emperor, in his prime, suddenly fell ill. This incident occurred suddenly, and King Li seized control of the government with drastic measures. At court, a minister aligning with the crown prince denounced Wei Jiuzhao's wicked ambitions, only to be beheaded by the imperial guards the next moment. As blood splattered the golden throne hall, everyone finally realized, even the palace guards, the official responsible for palace security, had long been in the 9th prince's employ. For a moment, a storm brewed. Empress Su had been under house arrest for many days. This time, it was her turn to repeatedly summon Wei Jiuzhao, but she received no response. Until late one night. At Prince Li's residence, a maid from the Weiyang Palace brought a jade tray covered in brocade. Removing the brocade revealed a small, aged rattle. Wei Jiuzhao gazed at the rattle, his dark eyes deepening, a depth so profound that it was impossible to fathom. Knowing it was the Hongmen banquet, Wei Jiuzhao remained determined to enter the palace. The system prompted me, this is the plot point where the villain is eliminated. I felt a little uneasy and checked again. Are you sure you can revive him as long as you complete the storyline? Only after receiving the system's affirmative answer did I dare to relax a little. I thought perhaps this was the best possible ending I could strive for. I was 8 months pregnant, and with difficulty, I supported my waist and insisted on escorting Wei Jiuzhao to the palace gate. The fog was thick, the wind was strong, and the snow was falling. I had just tied his cloak when Wei Jiuzhao suddenly pulled me into his arms. We hugged for a long time. My nose was aching, and I wanted him to stay several times. But in the end, I didn't say anything. When we parted, Wei Jiuzhao solemnly warned. Lin Lu, if there's a 1 in a million chance of unforeseen events, Gongsun Yan will take you away. I took a deep breath and forced a pale smile. I'm not leaving. Wei Zhizhao, the child and I will wait for your return. My voice was soft, almost a whisper. No matter what, we'll wait for your return. No matter how, no matter if I still remember, I'll always wait for you. 24. When Wei Zhizhao entered the Weiyang Palace, Empress Su was warming wine. Zhizhao, you're here. She smiled gently, and after Wei Zhizhao sat down at the table, she poured him a glass of wine. Empress Su said softly, I can't even remember the last time we drank and talked happily like this. 6 years old. Wei Zhizhao interrupted. 点 what? Empress Su's beautiful eyes widened slightly. Wei Zhizhao explained calmly, when I was 6, an enemy nation held the crown prince of Wei as a hostage. To protect Wei Chen, you coaxed me onto the sedan chair for the mission to the enemy nation. On the day of the mission, little Wei Zhizhao was held on Empress Su's lap for the first time. Little Wei Zhizhao was somewhat flattered. For as long as he could remember, Empress Su had always treated him with indifference. Little Wei Zhizhao had always been forced to hide in a corner, secretly watching her tenderly hold the crown prince, sing to him, and lull him to sleep. And then, Empress Su, shaking a rattle, coaxed him, saying, Good boy, from now on, your mother will be with you every day, okay? A child who had never been loved spent his entire life craving that scant bit of tenderness, like drinking poison to quench thirst. So, little Wei Zhizhao nodded vigorously, yes. Little Jiu will be good. Later, Empress Su coaxed him into drinking a glass of strong liquor. As the drunken little Wei Zhizhao was carried onto the sedan chair to the enemy country, the small rattle in his hand finally slipped and fell to the ground. Now, Empress Su's face paled. Ziyaju, back then, your mother was also forced to do so. Wei Zhizhao raised his eyes. So, now that your mother invites me to drink, is she also forced to do so? Empress Su's bright red nail polish gripped the edge of the table tightly, her lips trembling. Ziyaju, what happened back then was your mother's fault. Empress Su's eyes filled with tears, and she gazed at Wei Zhizhao almost pleadingly. My dear child, drink this glass of wine with your mother. From now on, your mother will be with you every day, okay? She seemed to have truly transformed into a good mother, vowing to repay Wei Zhizhao for all the affection she had owed him over the years. Now, this clumsy bit of affection was like a will-o'-the-wisp, snaring him, a moth that hadn't seen the light of day for 1,000 years. And Wei Zhizhao watched her quietly. After a long moment, he suddenly smiled. Mother, you've almost convinced me. If he had never met Lin Lu, perhaps Wei Zhizhao would have actually drunk this glass of wine. Now, Wei Zhizhao suddenly missed them. He missed a pair of calm, smiling eyes like 2 clear lakes reflecting the frosted reeds of autumn. When the palace maids were summoned to Weiyang Palace, Empress Su had already been forced to drink 2 cups of wine and lay curled up on the ground. She spat blood, her pupils dilated, yet she still pleaded. Please, he is your brother after all. Give Chen'er a chance to live. Wei Zhizhao remained silent. After a long moment, the hand clutching the hem of his robe finally lost its strength and fell to the ground. You care so much about Wei Chen? Wei Zhou scoffed. Even now you're not willing to lie to me? He looked at the small rattle in his hand. This toy, which he had finally acquired, was once the oldest and most worn one that Empress Su had ordered someone to pick out from among the toys Wei Chen had grown tired of. Wei Zhizhao gently shook the rattle. Dong, dong, dong. The ethereal drumbeats echoed through the deadly silence of the palace. Phoenix, oh, Phoenix, why has your virtue declined? The past cannot be changed, but the future can still be pursued. Finally, Wei Zhizhao dropped the rattle and walked out into the snowy wind. Wei Zhizhao thought it's a snowy and windy day, but at least someone is waiting for him to come home. 25. Even though I already knew the outcome, I still waited at the palace gate. My eyes were blank, staring blankly at the old reed deer in my hand. When the snow fell heavily, the system notification sounded still. The sound of horse hooves echoed down the long street. I looked up suddenly, almost thinking I was hallucinating. The horse neighed loudly. Before I could even stop, Wei Zhizhao easily dismounted and pulled me into his arms. He suddenly said, Qingqian. Before I could react, I said, Dian what? Wei Zhizhao stepped back, held my face, and said solemnly, Qingqian, the vastness of the universe, pity the greenness of the grass and trees. Our child will be named Qingqian. At the same time, 2 system notifications rang out in my head. Villain heartbeat, 99%. Warning. Warning. Plot kill disabled. Severely corrupted plot, please fix as soon as possible. 7 days later. In an alley. Wearing a veil on my head, I handed the tiger talisman to the masked figure across from me. In the original storyline, after Wei Zhizhao was poisoned, the crown prince went to the capital to defend the emperor, purged the 9th prince's followers, and firmly secured his position as crown prince. But now, Wei Zhizhao is still alive. A battle between him and the crown prince is inevitable. Based on the system's deductions, the plot has deviated, and the probability of the hero, Wei Chen, dying is 99%. Once the hero dies, the world line collapses, and the strategy mission will fail. The Lord God has ordered you to fix the plot at all costs, including stealing the tiger tally for the hero. Wei Zhizhao was completely unprepared for me, and I stole the tiger tally with almost no effort. Now, the masked figure removed his veil, revealing a face both familiar and unfamiliar. It was Wei Chen. I hadn't expected him to attend the appointment in person, and I was stunned for a moment. The resemblance, so resemblance. I'd asked the system countless times if Wei Chen is indeed my brother, Lin Shen. Each time, the system would remain silent for a long time. Sorry, I can't rule out this possibility. This has become a paranoia. In every sleepless dream, I return to that elevator, watching a blurred figure plunge into flames over and over again. Now, Wei Chen took the tiger talisman and cast a scrutinizing gaze upon me. Princess Li, why are you helping me? I lowered my eyes and shook my head slowly. Although I have sent the palace servants away, they will soon be here. Your Highness, please leave. Wei Chen gave me a deep look. When I have cleared the emperor's side. He paused, I will spare Prince Li's life. As Wei Chen was leaving, I couldn't help but call out to him. I had so many questions I wanted to ask: if he still remembered me, if he was doing well, if his wounds still hurt. But in the end, I simply whispered. Can you call me Xiaolu again? Wei Chen frowned, a little puzzled. He narrowed his eyes, studying me, trying to find a clue in my snow-white face, but to no avail. Finally, Wei Chen remained silent for a moment before speaking. Take care, Xiaolu. 26. Winter day, severe cold. Crown Prince Wei Chen led his troops to the Shenwu Gate. The system alarms blared incessantly, but I braved the heavy snow and left the palace, ignoring everyone's attempts to stop me. The system anxiously stated. The villain's prestige among the 3 armies is too high. Although the hero summoned troops with a tiger talisman, the soldiers all defected during the standoff. As I struggled to reach the city wall, I heard Wei Zhizhao sneer at the people below. Brother, what makes you think that the soldiers who fought alongside me on the battlefield would switch sides for a mere tiger talisman? Below the city wall, Wei Chen and his personal guards were surrounded by armored troops armed with spears. The circle of spear points shrank, pressing closer and closer, forcing them back to back, leaving them with no way to retreat. Up the city wall. Seeing me struggling forward, supporting my pregnant belly, Wei Zhizhao's expression darkened, bow and arrow in hand. He suddenly sneered and pulled me forward. I was trapped in Wei Zhizhao's arms, my back aching from the rubbing of his black armor. You've arrived just in time. Before I could react, he took my hand and placed the feathered arrow on it, then slowly drew the bowstring. The tip of the arrow pointed directly at Wei Chen's throat below the city walls. My breath hitched, and I instinctively tried to struggle, but I felt Wei Zhizhao's arm tighten around my waist. He tilted his head slightly and whispered in my ear. Lin Lu, who do you think was behind that poisoned arrow at the palace gate? I opened my mouth, staring down at the city walls in disbelief. Wei Chen, his face pale, stared at me from afar amidst the vast army. I couldn't see his expression, but I vaguely understood the meaning of the words "take care." My heart pounded, but I forced myself to say. Wei Zhizhao, he's your brother after all. At that, Wei Zhizhao's face darkened even more. The next second, his fingers on the arrow suddenly loosened. I was so startled I could barely breathe. With a desperate struggle, I managed to deflect the arrow by an inch. Bang! The bowstring cracked, and a strong wind blew my hair. The arrow, with a piercing whistle, struck Wei Chen's shoulder. Looking at Wei Chen, spewing blood and collapsing on the ground below the city, I trembled violently, tears streaming uncontrollably. Listening to my sobs, Wei Zhuzhao remained silent for a moment, then suddenly, angrily, dropped the iron-backed bow. He pressed my shoulder, his eyes frighteningly cold. Wei Chen was born the crown prince, a prince of great wealth and status, while I wasn't even worthy of a name. I served as his hostage for 10 years. My father, the emperor, and my mother, the empress, asked me to be his sharpener, and I kowtowed in gratitude. Lin Lu, why are you protecting him now? 27. I could no longer hear him, and only pleaded with tears. Wei Zhuzhao, can you please spare his life? Please. Wei Zhuzhao stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly raised his hand to his subordinates behind him. The soldiers below the city received the order. Some began slaughtering the crown prince's personal guards, while others began pouring kerosene. Wei Zhuzhao coldly declared. Tonight, a great fire will break out at Shenwu Gate. Tomorrow, everyone will know the crown prince, guilty of plotting rebellion and poisoning the empress, has been executed at Shenwu Gate. It took me a long moment to realize he was actually going to burn Wei Chen alive. I stared at him in disbelief. He's your own brother. I didn't know where I found the strength, but I desperately struggled to break free of Wei Zhuzhao's grasp and stumbled to the edge of the tower. My eyes widened in horror as I watched the infernal scene below. Amidst the dancing sparks, a blood-soaked Wei Chen screamed in agony, struggled, and writhed on the ground, ultimately engulfed in the flames. My stomach ached dully, and I collapsed to my knees, exhausted. Footsteps echoed behind me. Wei Zhuzhao grabbed me and pulled me up, pressing me into his arms. He covered my still tearing eyes with his hand. If you can't bear it, then don't look. The infernal sea of fire, the burning smell, the pitch-black vision. I felt as if I were back in that smoke-filled, dark elevator. I trembled in Wei Zhuzhao's arms, the cheers of the soldiers filling my ears. Wei Chen is dead, the traitor has been executed. Wei Chen is dead, the traitor has been executed. I finally fainted. Princess, push. Push. On the delivery bed, tears blurred my eyes with pain. I lost consciousness several times, only to be reawakened by pinching my philtrum. I heard the midwife report to Wei Zhuzhao. The baby was originally in a healthy position, and the term was full. But the princess has been overwhelmed with worry and nightmares for months, and now she's suddenly frightened. I'm afraid. The next moment, Wei Zhuzhao strode into the delivery room and approached my bedside. I looked at him, gritted my teeth, and raised my hand to slap him. My eyes were red, and I almost wanted to question him. There was a perfect ending, why did it have to come to this? Wei Zhuzhao lowered his eyes, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his thumb, and then said to the midwife expressionlessly, you can still hit, which means you still have the strength. Continue to deliver the princess. 28. I survived a near-death experience, gave birth to a baby boy, and then lay in a coma for 3 days. As soon as I opened my eyes, I heard the system's announcement. Strategy failed. Villain's heart rate has dropped to 40%. The system informed me that the world line unexpectedly did not collapse after the hero's death. But because the villain had learned of my betrayal, the Lord God had assessed that I could no longer complete the strategy and declared it a failure. I wasn't particularly moved, staring blankly at the bed curtains. The system hesitated for a moment. Sorry, host, you will be handed over to the Lord God for future responsibility. To prevent piracy of Xiaohu bot documents, choose Xiaohu when looking for a book robot. It's stable and reliable, and you won't fall into traps. I'll return to my original world first to check on your loved ones. It stopped abruptly before it could finish its words. Then, a robotic male voice echoed in my head. Lord God, no. 018, at your service. The Lord God is far more professional than the system. It offered a deal, emotionless. Wei Zhuzhao, blessed with good fortune, has become this world's villainous protagonist. Before the new capturer arrives, you must leave him and minimize his attraction to you. In exchange, the Chuansheju is still willing to heal your loved ones. My eyes flickered slightly, but my thoughts were a blur. Since you're going to replace the capturer, why not just let me die on the delivery bed? Wouldn't that be more convenient? As if reading my thoughts, the Lord God let out a meaningful laugh. Forced offline isn't a particularly brilliant strategy. I've seen countless capture cases and am well aware of Bai Yueguang's destructive power. Some people, dead, are more moving than if they were alive. 29. After being able to get out of bed, I didn't want to see Wei Jiuzhao. But every day when he went to court, I went to the greenhouse to see the child. 3 days later. Beside the pillow of the child's cradle, I saw a familiar, old, reed-shaped fawn. That day, I sat in the greenhouse for a long time. When Wei Jiuzhao pushed the door open, our eyes met. We were speechless. After a long moment, I was the first to break the silence. I don't like the name Qingqian. I looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in the cradle, Nianshen. Let's call him Wei Nianshen. Wei Jiuzhao closed his eyes and finally said, okay. Another long silence, and this time it was Wei Jiuzhao who spoke first. Lin Lu, I can pretend to have forgotten what you did. I interrupted him. Wei Jiuzhao, I'm the captor. I ignored his sudden stiffening expression and slowly told him everything: how I agreed to capture Linshen to save him, how I deceived him and gained his heart. Finally, I breathed a sigh of relief. Now the capture has failed. Wei Jiuzhao, I want to leave. Wei Jiuzhao suddenly chuckled. He stared at me stubbornly. After all that. Lin Lu, have you never been attracted to me? I frowned in stunned silence. I'd laid all my despicable lies before Wei Jiuzhao, bloody, but was that one shred of sincerity still the one thing he cared about? The Lord God made a dinging sound in my mind, snapping me out of my trance. I looked away and whispered softly, never. Wei Jiuzhao smiled. I don't believe it. My heartbeat inexplicably quickened, and I stood up, somewhat irritated. Wei Jiuzhao, what's there to disbelieve? I approached you only for strategy, so of course I never liked you. Wei Jiuzhao stared at me intently, his face expressionless, but tears welling in his eyes. Lin Lu, I don't believe it. Gazing into his persistent eyes, my numb heart felt an indescribable, rust-like pain. I didn't dare look any further, so I simply grabbed the jinjia deer beside the child's pillow and tossed it into the nearby stove. You. The moment the flames erupted, Wei Jiuzhao rushed to the stove, his right hand thrusting into the charcoal without hesitation. The charcoal burned his knuckles, but he seemed oblivious. Even though Wei Jiuzhao's reaction was incredibly quick, the jinjia deer he'd retrieved was still half scorched. The noise had woken little Nianshen in his cradle, and he burst into tears. I turned my eyes away, speaking in a calm tone. Wei Jiuzhao, I've never liked you. I didn't then, I don't now, and I never will. You, everything about you, and this child you forced upon me, disgust me to the core. The child seemed to sense something, and his cries grew increasingly pathetic, almost heartbreaking. Wei Jiuzhao lowered his head, his face hidden in the shadows, making it hard to see clearly. After a long moment, as if utterly exhausted, he said very softly. All right. Go ahead. When I left Prince Li's mansion, I took nothing with me, and no one stopped me. I walked aimlessly forward, my mind filled with the Lord God's satisfied praise. Congratulations, the villain's heartbeat has reached 100%. You're very clever. Letting him see his own bright moon rot before his eyes is enough to make him hate you. Ms. Lin Lu, take care of yourself. 30. Whether or not I'll take care of you for the rest of your life is hard to say, but it's clear that things are in turmoil. I finally managed to coax Xiao Shizi into agreeing to return Lu Ernia's wedding dress immediately. But as soon as I left, I saw a fleet of carriages parked not far away. In fact, for the past month, Wei Jiuzhao had been coming to me every few days to borrow the seal. For years, the emperor has been bedridden, neglecting state affairs. Although Wei Jiuzhao is the crown prince, he already holds immense power. He could use the imperial seal for fun, but I really don't understand why he's so obsessed with it. Every time he comes, I avoid him, but it's never been like this. I've walked right in on him. Su Wanwan, dressed in a pink dress, strode quickly up to me, her eyes strangely smug. Miss Lin, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince invites you. For some reason, the long-dormant comments flared up again as Su Wanwan appeared. The ancestral worship ceremony will be in a few days, and the baby will be taken back. The ancestral worship ceremony requires kneeling all day and abstaining from food and water. The baby dreads this ceremony the most, ha ha ha. My sister's strategy progress is regressing every day. Hurry up and take the baby back to cultivate her relationship with her. I'm really sick of seeing this scheming female supporting character here. You can vomit about the previous part yourself. I quite enjoy watching the supporting actress and the child interact. At least their values are sound. In the carriage, Wei Jiuzhao, expressionless, was reading a bamboo scroll. He was dressed in a dark blue robe, his appearance unchanged from years ago, though the aura between his brows and eyes had become even more fierce. I was on pins and needles, but even more nervous was little Persimmon. He seemed terrified of Wei Jiuzhao. The usually arrogant and domineering little bully now huddled behind me, only his bright eyes piercing through as he observed us warily. Suddenly, Wei Jiuzhao slammed the bamboo scroll onto the low table. I jumped, startled. Before I could recover, little Persimmon, who had been hiding behind me, had crawled out. He slammed his knees down, banging his head heavily on the ground. He said sternly, "Your son pays his respects to my father." If he hadn't been playing all afternoon, his sleeves and trouser legs covered in mud, this grand ceremony would have looked quite formal. Little Persimmon knelt for a long time, and Wei Jiuzhao showed no intention of letting him get up. I hesitated to speak, "Wei Jiuzhao." Wei Jiuzhao didn't look at me, but said coldly, "Wei Nianshen, do you admit your mistake?" Little Persimmon knelt on the ground, shaking his head in thought for a moment, then tentatively said, "Shouldn't your son have put a bit on the horse at the village entrance and used it to plow the fields?" Wei Jiuzhao's forehead vein jumped, "Dian Wei Nianshen." Little Persimmon shrank back in fear and fell silent, not daring to say another word. Wei Jiuzhao closed his eyes, then opened them again, looking at me. "Lin Lu, you've been teaching your son for a month, and you've just let him run wild?" I burst into laughter. "He's the crown prince, and he came all this way just to vent his anger on my mother and me." I pulled little Persimmon up from the ground. "Come, show your father what you've learned this past month." Little Persimmon looked at me, then furtively glanced at Wei Jiuzhao's expression. Seeing Wei Jiuzhao remain silent, little Persimmon hesitated for a moment, then reached out and began to slowly untie his belt. After removing his outer robe and shoes, he carefully folded and smoothed the garment, folding it neatly. He also placed his boots together, toes facing outward. Seeing this, Wei Jiuzhao raised an eyebrow in surprise. Then little Persimmon picked up his outer robe again and put it on meticulously, tightening and tying the laces one by one. This spoiled child, accustomed to having everything handed to him, now carefully straightened his collar and sleeves and, neatly dressed, spun around in front of Wei Jiuzhao and me. Watching this, Wei Jiuzhao's expression finally softened. Not bad. Over the past month together, I've discovered that while Xiao Shizi has many spoiled and willful bad habits, his ability to recognize and memorize words is far superior to other children his age. I knew then that Wei Jiuzhao wasn't completely indifferent to him. Seeing Xiao Shizi staring at him eagerly, Wei Jiuzhao asked, "Apart from this, what else have you learned?" Xiao Shizi replied politely, "Father, I've also learned how to wash myself, wipe my mouth, and make friends. Oh, and today, Mother even taught me how to make steamed buns." As soon as this address came out, Xiao Shizi realized he'd made a mistake and glanced at me cautiously. I lowered my eyes to hide the emotion behind them. I simply raised my hand and stroked the top of his soft head. In the end, Wei Jiuzhao didn't take Xiao Shizi with him. When Xiao Shizi and I disembarked from the carriage, Su Wanwan, who was waiting outside, looked incredulous. "But Your Highness, tomorrow is the ancestral worship ceremony. This is against protocol." Wei Jiuzhao simply raised his hand to interrupt her. "The crown prince has caught a cold and is recuperating in the eastern palace. It's inappropriate to offend the ancestors." His tone was calm, but undeniable. I was clutching the clothes basket and about to leave with Xiao Shizi, when he suddenly pulled me back to Wei Jiuzhao's carriage. Xiao Shizi lifted the curtain and whispered, "By the way, father, you were wrong before. Mother has never thought of remarrying. It was that pork seller who insisted that mother marry him." I was stunned for a moment, while Wei Jiuzhao and the carriage remained silent. Little Persimmon hesitated for a moment, then boldly suggested, "Father, could you send someone to destroy his shop?" I immediately covered little Persimmon's mouth and instinctively said to Wei Jiuzhao. It has nothing to do with Brother Lu. Don't make things difficult for him. A sneer finally rang out from the carriage. You're going to protect him already? Me. 32. After returning the wedding dress, I seriously rejected Lu Erniu. I said I wasn't being frivolous, and my previous polite refusal was sincere, not a half-hearted offer. Lu Erniu hesitantly said, Lin Lu, I'm sorry. I thought you were embarrassed. On the way home, the moonlight was as bright as a mirror. Little Persimmon rocked my hand back and forth, skipping and jumping, begging for a reward. Thinking of his behavior in the carriage, I couldn't help but smile. Okay. What do you want? Little Persimmon stroked his chin in thought, while I silently counted the money in my pocket. Finally, Little Persimmon pounded his palm with his tiny fist. I want a little deer woven from reeds. His eyes sparkled. Dad has a little deer woven from reeds, but it's black, old, and ugly. I want a new one. Something nice. I was stunned for a moment. A strange bitterness welled up in my heart. But on the surface, I still smiled and said, Okay, tomorrow night after dinner, we'll go to the river to pick reeds. The next evening, leaving the village entrance, over a hillside, we arrived at a river bank. Autumn daylight falls early, so Little Persimmon carried a small lantern. By the river bank in autumn, Little Persimmon leaped into the grass and soon returned with an armful of reeds. He came over to me, urging me to weave faster. I nodded gently, my fingertips clumsily folding the straw. Soon, a lifelike reed deer lay in my palm. Little Persimmon took the deer, his eyes sparkling. I'll pick more. Mom, please make a few more. I smiled and replied, Okay. I made 9 in a row, and Little Persimmon couldn't bear to throw any away. I strung them together with a straw rope and tied them tightly around his waist. Before I knew it, the sky had completely darkened. We were about to leave for home when a muffled thunder rumbled from the pitch-black sky. Smelling the earthy smell in the air, Little Persimmon grew uneasy. Is it going to rain? I reassured him, Don't be afraid. I'll hold your hand. On the way back, it began to pour. I took off my coat and used it as an awning over Little Persimmon's head. The rain grew heavier, extinguishing the little lantern. In the pitch-black night, the shroud of rain made it difficult to discern the direction, and the mountain path beneath us was even more slippery and difficult to navigate. As we turned a corner, Little Persimmon suddenly slipped and tumbled down the hillside. I instinctively pulled him into my arms. The next moment, I held his tiny body tightly as we tumbled down the slope. 33. When I woke up again, I was in a wet, dead leaf pile at the foot of the hillside. Little Persimmon's heartbreaking cries pierced my ears. Mom. Don't die. When I opened my eyes, his sobs abruptly stopped. He rubbed his eyes and leaned closer. Mom, does it hurt? It was just dawn. I had been unconscious all night. I quickly pulled myself up and felt Little Persimmon's body from head to toe. His face was covered in tears, and his body was a mess, but thankfully, he was unharmed. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, a piercing pain shot through my right ankle. Little Persimmon followed my gaze. Seeing my swollen ankle, his mouth suddenly pursed, and his eyes reddened again. I pained myself to comfort him, It's okay, it's just a sprain. I gritted my teeth and tried to stand. But as soon as my injured foot touched the ground, the pain blinded me, and I fell back into the pile of dead leaves. I suddenly felt a little panicked. This was a desolate mountain area, with no one around. We were still wearing clothes soaked by last night's rain. Little Persimmon's face was flushed, and I worried he might have a fever. Seeing my pale face, Little Persimmon slid closer, his warm little body pressed against mine. He was clearly frightened, but he still said to me firmly, Mom, don't be afraid. Fubao and I made plans to buy candied haws today. When she finds out we're missing, she'll definitely send someone to look for us. I stroked his head and held him in my arms. I don't know how long it took. I felt a little drowsy, my mind racing as I contemplated the possibility of crawling back with just my hands. I raised my hand to my forehead and shuddered from the heat. I couldn't help but smile bitterly, so good. Little Persimmon hadn't caught a fever yet, but I was the first to fall ill. Before my fuzzy mind could fully shut down, I suddenly heard the sound of dead branches being crushed from above. At the same moment, a shadow descended. I raised my eyes with difficulty, only to see a figure, backlit, pushing aside some brush, heading our way. Little Persimmon excitedly called out, "Dad!" 34. After examining my injuries, Wei Jiuzhao turned his back to me and squatted down. "Come up." I was still a little incredulous. "Dian Wei Jiuzhao, why are you here?" He was still wearing his formal attire for the ancestral ceremony, but the hem was stained with mud, and his hair was a little disheveled. Wei Jiuzhao said succinctly, "Your system tells me you're in danger." Before I could comprehend the meaning of this, I heard him urging me again, somewhat fiercely. "Get on top." I softly let out a "oh" and slowly slid onto his back. Wei Jiuzhao tugged at my knees and stood up. It was then that Little Persimmon noticed the familiar string of reed deer hanging from Wei Nianshan's waist. It must have fallen by the side of the road last night as we rolled down the hillside, and now it had become a landmark guiding Wei Jiuzhao to us. Little Persimmon pointed at the string and said weakly, "Dad, this is the deer Mom gave me." Wei Jiuzhao took a step forward and said coldly, "Shut up. Follow me." Little Persimmon also let out an "oh" and obediently took the ribbon from Wei Jiuzhao's dress. On the mountain road, I was on Wei Jiuzhao's back, dazed and feverish, and didn't notice his pale complexion and his slow, shallow steps. I rested my burning face on the crook of Wei Jiuzhao's neck, gently nuzzling it. Wei Jiuzhao sighed and whispered, "Lin Lu, could you please behave yourself?" I didn't realize what I had done wrong. I just thought he was being mean. For a moment, I felt aggrieved, yet deep down, I felt I didn't deserve the grievance. "So," I whispered, "Wei Jiuzhao, do you really hate me?" Wei Jiuzhao snorted coldly, "Yes, I hate you. I hate you so much. Lin Lu, I absolutely hate you." I uttered a soft, "oh." The next second, hot tears dripped down Wei Jiuzhao's collar. Wei Jiuzhao froze for a moment, then quickly taunted again. "Lin Lu, are you feeling wronged? I begged you so humbly back then, and you wouldn't even offer a word of comfort. Now you're the one feeling wronged?" I sniffled, feeling that he had a point. I deserved it. So, crying, I said, "Okay, Wei Jiuzhao, then you can continue to hate me." Wei Jiuzhao snorted coldly. "Don't worry, I will." Little Persimmon, who was following beside him, rolled his eyes, shook his head, and sighed. "Dad, in fact, all you're hating is Mom for not caring enough about you, right?" Wei Jiuzhao was so angry that a vein popped in his forehead. "Dian Wei Nianshan." After walking for a while, Wei Jiuzhao weighed me down with a look of resignation. "Dian Lin Lu, can you please stop crying?" Before I knew it, my tears had soaked his shoulders, as if the world's smallest rain had fallen on them. I was delirious with fever, and could only sob and whisper, "I'm sorry, Wei Jiuzhao. I'm a strategist, I'm so sorry." Wei Jiuzhao didn't answer, but simply listened quietly to my mumbling, stepping forward. He was silent for a long time, and finally, with a resigned sigh, "Lin Lu, no need to apologize." I cried even harder. "Why? Don't you even want to hear my apology?" Wei Jiuzhao seemed completely at his wit's end, and said, coaxing me like a child, "Because I apologized the first time you met me." I was a little dazed, recalling the night we first met. Back then, the young Wei Jiuzhao held a dagger to my throat. And I wrote on his palm, "Sorry. Did I hurt you?" So, I had already apologized long ago. Finally, content, I fell into a deep sleep. 35. When I woke up again, I was in a clinic. I moved my bandaged ankle. It didn't hurt much. I stood up and looked around, but there was no sign of Wei Jiuzhao or Xiao Shizi. I felt a little lost. Have they left? Before I could recover, someone suddenly opened the door and entered. I looked closely. It was Gongsun Yan. I opened my mouth. "Mr. Gongsun, what brings you here?" Gongsun Yan sat down beside the bed and said to me with a smile. "The master just finished the ancestral worship ceremony and was busy all night. So, he took the young master back to the East Palace for the time being. The master also told me to pass on a message. He has important matters to attend to and will be back in a few days. Don't worry." I lowered my eyes and said nothing. After waiting a moment, Gong Sunyan spoke. Princess, do you know? Since you left, a total of 13 attackers have appeared around the master. Initially, these attackers were all targeting Wei Jiuzhao. Wei Jiuzhao hated attackers the most, so he naturally dealt with them with swift force. But later, the attackers' methods became increasingly cunning and difficult to defend against. They went from being physical beings to being soul transmigrating beings, and even worse, some attempted to redeem Xiao Shizi in order to capture Wei Jiuzhao. The fifth attacker, his soul, became Xiao Shizi's wet nurse. She couldn't understand. She had imitated the formula of classic redemption stories, making Xiao Shizi fried rice, cream cake, and shaved ice again, but why couldn't she win over this tiny child? Seeing that the 3-year-old Xiao Shizi showed no interest in the food, she threatened, "Your mother abandoned you because you don't like fried rice." So, when Wei Jiuzhao found Xiao Shizi, he was desperately shoveling cold rice into his mouth. His face was covered in grease, and he retched by the end, muttering to himself, "As long as Nianshan finishes his meal, mother won't abandon me." From then on, Wei Jiuzhao began exploiting the rules to deliberately screen his captors. After all, it's better to keep a well-informed sniper nearby than to be constantly on guard against hidden attacks. I was a little confused, so. Su Wanwan? Gong Sunyan nodded. She is the 13th captor, replacing a concubine from a branch of the Su family. The master saw that she was relatively well behaved, so he kept her as a pawn to consolidate the Su family's power. However, it seems she recently used a skill called fan commentary on you, but it backfired. I guess the master won't keep her any longer. I nodded slowly, digesting this overwhelming amount of information. After a while, I asked again, "So, it wasn't her who was going to marry Wei Jiuzhao?" Gong Sunyan was stunned for a moment, then burst into laughter. My master heard the princess was planning to remarry, and he was so angry that he spread the news of the wedding. But the news was kept secret for months, and the princess was completely unaware of it. Your subordinate originally said, "This was a stupid move," he said with a sly look in his eyes. I didn't expect it would actually work. 36. 3 days later, by the Reed River. I had just finished weaving a reed deer when I heard approaching footsteps behind me. Wei Jiuzhao, dressed in a moon-white robe, stopped by my side. "The system told you everything?" I nodded gently. Yesterday, the long silent system found me again. When I failed in my strategy, the system blamed itself. It returned to my original world to check on Lin Shen's condition. Thus, it discovered the secret and illegal operation of Lord God No. 018, Lord God 018, eager to earn the enormous points for defeating the villain but unwilling to bear the penalty of collapsing the main storyline, used a special operation to drag Lin Shen's fragmented consciousness into this world. It was certain I would betray Wei Jiuzhao for Lin Shen, and I did just as it predicted. But even it hadn't anticipated that Wei Jiuzhao would be able to defy fate. Later, the system shuttled between the two worlds to gather evidence, even risking its own life to contact Wei Jiuzhao. Finally, it faithfully reported Lord God 018's crimes. The system contacted me again yesterday. Lord God 018 has been suspended for investigation. Host, I have recovered your brother's consciousness and applied to the Transmigration Book Bureau to restart the strategy. If you successfully defeat the villain again, your loved one will recover and return to their original world. Now, Wei Jiuzhao and I stand side by side by the river. Wei Jiuzhao could clearly hear the system's notification. He turned his head to look at me, unable to distinguish between joy and anger. "So, you want to conquer me again?" I didn't say anything, simply handed him the Jianjia phone in my hand. System prompt, villain heart attention value, 60%. Wei Jiuzhao raised an eyebrow. "Wei Nianshan has a whole bunch, and it's my turn to have just this one." I was amused. How can you be jealous of your own son? Villain heart attention value, 80%. Wei Jiuzhao snorted coldly, but still took the Jianjia phone. Villain heart attention value, 99%. I looked at Wei Jiuzhao, tears welling in my eyes. "Dian Wei Jiuzhao, why are you so easy to conquer?" He stared at me blankly. He looked fierce, but to me, he looked more like a wounded beast, trying to maintain his dignity. "Lin Lu, what are you going to do about that last point?" I thought for a moment, then stood on tiptoe and gently kissed him on the lips. Villain heart rate, 100%. Congratulations, host, the strategy was successful. Repair process initiated. Host, would you like to return to your original world? I've been in this world for a long time and have long since adapted to life here. After much hesitation, I finally opened the door and let the person in. Beside me, Wei Zhuzhao was still waiting for my answer. So, I took his hand and whispered. Wei Zhuzhao, can you wait for me this time? Wei Zhuzhao was silent for a moment, then finally took my hand, interlocking our fingers. Okay, Lin Lu. The child and I will wait for you to come home together. 37. Little Persimmon, bored, threw a stone, startling a flock of water birds from the riverbank. He rubbed his rumbling stomach, feeling a little aggrieved. Father, I'm so hungry. So hungry, so hungry, so hungry. Little Persimmon couldn't understand why had his father been leaving home early and returning late for 7 days, keeping him company in this desolate place every day. On the shore, Wei Zhuzhao, without even turning back, coldly said, "Shut up." Little Persimmon pouted and reluctantly returned to his original position. He muttered with despair. Okay, Mother said. If you're hungry, recite your lessons. If you recite, you won't be hungry anymore. So, Little Persimmon drew out his voice. The reeds are lush, the white dew turns to frost. Amidst the childish voice, the wind rustled the reeds along the riverbank. And Wei Zhuzhao, as if sensing something, suddenly raised his eyes. The so-called beloved is across the water. Across the water, a slender figure gazed back at him from afar, a long-awaited reunion that required no words.